Episode number 3 of my health journey. We're picking up where we left off. So last time we were talking about, we had jumped back in time. We did a bit of time traveling back to the early days of when I exited my mother's womb, talking a bit about my parents, my grandparents, epigenetic input as it plays out throughout our lives. But if we go back to episode 1, we actually left off around 2015 when I had my first round of labs followed up after a life insurance policy flagged some elevated liver enzymes. And go listen to episode 1 if you haven't listened to that yet. So today we're picking back up in 2015. So the first follow-up labs were in April of 2015. So during this year this would have been a little over a year into practice for the farm. So at this point, we honestly, through the farm business, we took off like a rocket in the first 6 months. We kind of dipped down because we had some hard realizations as first-time business owners. And from that point on, we just slowly started climbing, and we've been doing that ever since. So give myself a little pat on the back for that one. So during this time, I started to have not necessarily time freedom, but I felt a little more secure in the business. We were still working a ton on the business. One of the things that we do to market the farm, our chiropractic practice, is we work a lot of races. And I was already pretty heavily involved in trail running, but at this point I said, hey, I'm going to really give this a go. So I got these labs in April of 2015, and in May, a month later, is the Xterra Southeast Championships, which have been for years. This year, actually, 2022 was the first year that they canceled them. I think Xterra is going through some big company changes. But there's a Southeast Championship, which there's a off-road triathlon the Saturday, and then there's a trail run that Sunday. And we always work the triathlon, and then somebody on the team usually runs the trail run. And this year I said, hey, I'm going to run the 21K, and I'm going to see, because the 21K at that time was the championship distance race, and I'm going to see if I can qualify to go to Hawaii. And Hawaii is where the U.S. World Championships of Trail Running, this is deemed by Xterra, this isn't the agreed upon U.S. World Trail Running Championship, because there really isn't one. They're held at Kailua Ranch in Oahu. Well, backing up a little bit, so Sloan and I were married on October 10th of 2014. I better know that date, right? And we did not take a honeymoon, honestly, because of money. We were brand new business owners and brand new in debt up to our ass postgraduate students. And also we just didn't have time because we were in the practice. So over a year later, we said, hey, if I qualify for this race, my sister, out of the kindness of her heart, said, hey, she was living in Oahu at the time because her husband, my brother-in-law, is in the military. She said, we will fly you down to Hawaii for a pseudo honeymoon, right? And you can stay at our house and you can get away and go down to Waikiki. So I said, hey, we will do that. So I go out, I bust my hump, I qualify for the championships, which, it's not like it was that hard, to be honest, but I qualify. During this time, Sloan in particular, was getting heavily involved in CrossFit. And that was a big boon to our business. And she was far more competitive in CrossFit than I was, coming from a gymnastics background. Probably should have done powerlifting in high school. We may talk about that at some point, but she could have easily broken some state records in Florida when she was in high school. So very strong, athletic, unless you are having her play pickup basketball or pig, and gymnasty, right? So a great CrossFit, just athlete. And she started getting very into it. So we were doing a lot of CrossFit. We had access to a couple different gyms. Iron Tribe's a local boutique version of CrossFit. So that was a lot of where I did my training. This was also when CrossFit Endurance came about. Brian McKenzie, I kind of maybe had a bro crush on him. So I took this mindset, and I still to this day am not a high volume guy, even for ultra endurance athletes. But I had this mindset of lower volume, higher quality, higher intensity, work on your weaknesses in movement and strength. I still adhere to a lot of that, just not from the CrossFit mindset. So I was doing a lot of high intensity workouts, high intensity running workouts, gearing up after I qualified at the Southeast Championships. I think it was May 21st, 2015, which was to be held December 6th, 2015, if I'm correct. I have the race date up here. December 6th, 2015. So I had quite a bit of time to train. I just said, hey, I'm going to get after it. And during this time, I started doing a bunch of track workouts. I was coaching for the Navy Wounded Warrior Safe Harbor program. So I was, getting some feedbacks from some other coaches like Kyle Putman, a local, I don't even know what I'd call Kyle, a track historian, aficionado guru, a great guy. But he got me the coaching gig there. So I was just heavily involved in running in a lot of different ways and just training my butt off, and got fairly fast, especially for a sprint athlete going to mid distance. So it's a half marathon distance, 21K for the World Championships. While I'm training, as I alluded to in the first episode, I was still having intermittent issues with hematuria, or it just looked like I was peeing Hawaiian punch. I was having some little, injuries and niggles and things like that. Nothing out of the norm. So we leave for Hawaii, and I still remember, that I'm going to have to foreshadow a little bit here, but on my first round of follow-up labs, there was a depression in my white blood cells, my hematocrit, and a slight increase in corpuscular volume. So there's already signs of maybe something's not right besides just liver enzymes. So I trained my butt off all year. We fly down for this race. We get there, I think 2 or 3 days before. I find a local chiropractor, which had a kick-ass office in their home with a hyperbaric chamber. And I said, hey, I want to get rid of any jet lag. Get in the hyperbaric chamber. I'm doing everything that I possibly can. And I go out to the race morning of Saturday, December 6th, Kailua Ranch. If you're not familiar with Kailua Ranch, this is where they shot a lot of Jurassic Park, King Kong. It's a very cool setup, huge event. And I'll show a picture here. I line up on the front with just some badasses, right? David Roche was there, and Kimber Maddox, and which I believe they both won, female, male. People from all over the world are at this race, and I'm on the front line, probably a little bit out of place, but I had lofty goals. I thought that I could easily go sub 121 in this trail race, which in my estimation, based on prior years, would put me easily in the top 10, probably the top 5. So here's how the race breaks down. I take off like a bat out of hell. And I think I'm in 5th place for the first 3 miles. And then I start getting passed by a couple people that are just, probably much better runners than me. I get to mile 5, and I'm not hitting a wall yet, but I'm just kind of falling into my pace. And I think maybe 9th or 10th in this time. Via social media, I had come across a guy named Sergio Florian, who is a physical therapist in Oahu. And he was also running this race. I think he actually ended up finishing 10th this year, which I think Sergio at that time, he is, I think 3 years older than me. So he was in his, mid 30s, maybe he's a little bit older than me, or older than that. Anyways, I kind of see him pass me. And at that point, I knew, just based on what I had seen on Strava and social media, I was like, I'm not doing so hot. So if anybody's ever run this race, around the halfway mark, you start climbing some switchbacks, some dirt road switchbacks to the top of the mountain. And when you hit the top of the mountain, it's always this, we're talking almost rainforest. It's usually this giant muddy downhill descent for the rest of the race. As I'm climbing, it's getting really hot. I guess I'm not prepared for the humidity is what I'm thinking at this point. And I am just tanking. I literally have to stop and walk, which is pretty embarrassing when you're in the top 10 halfway through a race, a world championship race, and then you start walking. And I'm noticing that I'm starting to have double vision. I'm swaying back and forth. People are coming up next to me and kind of you okay? So I still remember this vividly. I get to the top of mountain. It's a mountain at Kailua Ranch, and there's a kind of a tunnel that you can see through the trees because you're about ready to go back down into the forest, and you can kind of see over this big overlook. And I still remember this. There was a aid station table with a bunch of Power Bar energy gels. I still remember Power Bar. And I grabbed two because I'm just like, I literally get to the top and I have to stop for a second. And I'm like swaying, and I go to grab those. And a guy that was in it, he had to be in his late 50s, early 60s, slaps them out of my hand. And he goes, those won't even kick in by the time you're done with the race. Let's go. And like grabs my arm. Thank God. Because I think I would have just sat there. And I remember there was like a helicopter coming up from the hill and like drones and cameras. And here I am just like absolutely probably, pale as a ghost, dying. So I start the downhill descent, and it is muddy as all get out. I mean, literally just everybody's falling down. And I remember at one point I fell and slipped, and my right leg went back behind me, and my hamstring cramped so hard I just had to roll like off the side of the hill, just covered in mud. And I just kind of sat there for a second. I was like, all right, you got to get to the end of this race. So all that to be said, the last 2 miles of the race, I felt as good as I did the first, 4, which is not uncommon for a race. Looking at my stats on Ultra Sign Up, I finished in 60th overall. I don't know how many people were in this race, put me in the top 65% or whatever, in 2:02. So I didn't finish in my sub 121 goal by a long shot. And I still remember my wife and my family was there, my sister, my brother-in-law, my nephews, and they were, 120 passes, 130 passes, 140. My wife's like, dear God, he fell off the side of the mountain or broke his leg. And she's starting to ask people. And here I come rolling in, just looking like I've been beaten with a rubber hose. And and then to top it all off, somebody stole my socks as I was at the hose down station. Who does that? Anyways, the plan was from Kailua to have my sister drop us off in Waikiki, and we were going to do a 2-day Waikiki mini honeymoon, being broke new entrepreneurs, business owners. We get down there. I wake up the next morning. I have like 103-degree fever. I have a raging headache. I'm just sicker than a dog. And I just look at Sloan and I'm like, I'll try my best because we're on our honeymoon, but like I am miserable. And I'm not saying everybody knows this is an endurance sport. It's like I was training and you traveled and then I raced hard. Like you get immune depression with that. But here's what I would say is that this became somewhat of a theme that anytime I would do like a hard effort or travel in particular, I was finding out I was getting sick. And that's just not fun for anybody. So obviously, so then in March of the following year, so this is December, I kind of say after that race, I trained my ass off and, I thought I was going to be in the top 10. I was like, oh man, it's going to put me in like, spotlight or trail running. Like I just had, which is not the case whatsoever by any means. So I was like, I'm going to take a big break. Well, I'm going to back up again. So 4th of July of that year while I was training, I was doing all this CrossFit endurance type working out and training. And I remember a day or two before we were leaving to go to my mom's house in Illinois, we did a fairly hard workout with, some sort of pull-up cycling in it. And I woke up the morning that we were supposed to drive to Illinois. And sometimes I'll sleep with my stomach and I'll have an arm like this or something. I could not extend my arm and my biceps were gigantic. Well, you can probably, if you're familiar with what CrossFit is notorious with, I had localized rhabdomyolysis. So now we're seeing I've had elevated liver enzymes. Whether it was actually too much work or something in my body is not able to handle the workload, aka kidneys, like it should. I show up to my mom's house, who already thinks I work out too much and is unhealthy, which is pretty ironic. And I have Popeye arms, and I got bingo wings going. And she just thinks this is the dumbest thing ever, that I'm doing this to myself through working out. And I'm like, it wasn't that hard of a workout. This is what doesn't make sense to me, that I don't understand why this happened. And, I try to say, well, hey, I'm going to go do another workout when we get there in the morning and stretch it out. And it doesn't help. And it's just very painful. And I had some labs done after that with some elevated creatinine too. But on the labs to follow up with that, I still had actually vitamin D that was lower than before. So prior to that, it'd been 28. Now it's down to 26, and I'm supplementing with vitamin D at this point. My cholesterol, total cholesterol, 245, and my liver enzymes, in particular GGT, is 119, which is pretty high. So there's something going on, right? Very fit. Like I'm running at this point like a 158, 800. I'm participating in the U.S. Championship, trail running half marathon, uh, working out, eating clean, doing all the things. And it's like, I'm getting sick more than I'd like to. My body, yeah, even though it's hard workouts, seems to not be able to handle it and recover like I should. And I'm just getting these like subtle clues of, something's not right, but we just can't put our finger on it. And, I continued, if I'm looking at Ultra Sign Up and I kind of back up timeline wise. So if that race was in December 2015, I just kept racing, and, I won. Here I won a race a couple weeks before. We look at, going into early part of 2016, I'm winning races, placing third, 27 miler, I get third. Like, not to toot my own horn, but I'm still doing really well. But in every one of these races or hard efforts, I'm still having, some hematuria. At this point, I think in 2017 is the first time that I dealt with a kidney stone. And I'll tell that story, plus continue the rest of the story. Maybe give some more insights on, just I've heard it called the gaslighting of health, that some of the things that we think are healthy or that we should be able to get away with. And I'm going to in particular talk about part of the story of what's going on with our daughter right now, with some of her lab work and how it's being handled or mishandled, however you want to look at it. And we'll pick up where we left off next time.